来我们要邀请的就是 Jeff Arnett， 他代表的是这个我们刚刚在特别来宾里面已经介绍过了，他今天要跟大家讲的是这个有关于他的经历。那么我们很高兴请到了 John Fu， 我们的好朋友来为他做翻译。Thank you。
In 1945, October 15, one C-46 landing on Taipei Airport, Taiwan being occupied by Japan 50 years. Ladies and gentlemen, Captain Arnett Jeffrey is the one, the pilot who flew C-46 to Taiwan. He made a history record. 好，我用中文解释一下。这个1945年，我坐下。当日本人投降以后呢，不到30天，一架飞机从南京起飞，降落在台北松山机场，下午5点钟，带了6个国民政府的官员，这些官员接收台湾的。当这个飞机到的时候，杰斐告诉我，他吓死了，因为日本人每个人的手还拿着枪的。不过呢，日本人已经收到冈川宁次的命令，投降放下武器，所以台湾就很和平的把台湾给接收了。Jeffrey 呢，他住在 Pasadena， 有一天我请他去演讲，我一看那个照片，我说你这个就是历史上的一个很重要的照片啊，他现在变得很有名了，所以他跟我们讲故事。Okay, you start a story from Pasadena. Go ahead.
This is the real thing. Wow. Now, I want to correct something. People refer to me as a flying tiger, but the flying tigers were people who were in China roughly December 41 to April 42. And then the Japanese came in and swept through Burma, and the Americans told the volunteers, the real original Flying Tigers, you can go back to your units. Now we're moving in the 14th Air Force. And the 14th Air Force took up the Flying Tiger tag, which we have on our sleeve. If you wait a second, I take my coat off. Because this seems to be a week in which we're talking a lot about veterans.
I translate. 我给大概 go ahead, I translate.
Talking a lot about veterans. So I thought I might dress up a little as one if I take my coat off, just a minute.
这个在我们历史上啊，飞虎队呢有5个阶段。第一个就是陈纳德请了100个 AVG volunteer 的志愿大队，在10个月以后呢，然后从印度派那个特遣部队，又经过8个月，然后这个战争越打越烈，史迪威就把飞虎队变成了第14航空军，14航空军有上千个人，然后把 Jeffrey 呢，他是飞运输机的。Yeah。Great, that's right. 这是远征军，结果呢，他就在14航空军里面当飞行员。Yeah, that's right. So 这就是他的历史。他们自称为14航空军，对我们讲，就都叫飞虎，因为陈纳德把每一个飞机上都画了牙齿。
那个主讲者有一个麦克风，他要讲的话，我是2个麦克风啊。有英文跟中文都会听到。
然后也请大家手机关震动，谢谢。
I've known John a little while, a couple of years, but I never told him that I knew Doolittle. And here he is. There's my old friend in the first few panels, who did a marvelous job. It kind of electrified the whole United States. My story to you is a simple one, reminding you that after 7 years of assault by Japan, China was down to a single lifeline. No shipping could get in. There wasn't any railroad coming in. And they were really isolated and getting choked. And it was Madame Chang. I think she was called the Dragon Lady by some people. There was a funny paper cartoon called Terry and the Pirates in this country, and there was a woman in the character in the in the comic strip, and this was beautifully written. It was not funny-looking figures; they were precise, and she was called the Dragon Lady, which I think Madame Chang might have picked up that handle back in Washington, D.C. too. But General Chenault, or Captain Chenault at the time, wanted to help out. And he got a bunch of pilots to go over with him, train them for it. There were a number of what we call itchy pilots. They wanted to pull a trigger somewhere. And they joined his organization and went over as the original Flying Tigers. They didn't last much longer than April of '42. When the Japanese hit Pearl Harbor, that changed the whole picture. So the 14th Air Force moved in. They adapted their Flying Tiger emblem and sent them on their way. They could stay if they wanted to with the 14th. I was in high school at that time. The now famous Flying Tiger, excuse me, went way down in the southwest of China, Yunnan province. I was going to be stationed there for 6 months later on. This was all to save the Burma Road, which is the only thing open. But as of Pearl Harbor's activities, the Japanese swept into Burma, went clear up north. It's not a large country. And they shut down the Burma Road. They just stopped the west end of it. You may remember, I don't know that you do, a very memorable book called God is My Co-Pilot. Details that 6 months very well, written by Robert Scott. It happened that when I was 15, my school made a trip to the Chino airport because it was a cadet base. And this was 1940. We wanted to see what the cadets were doing there. The captain in charge was Robert Scott. And years later, under the going to a convention of the Hump Pilots Association in Georgia, we went to the opening of a new museum for China activities, and there's Robert Scott again. I told him, I said, I've met you before, a long time before. It was shortly after Pearl Harbor that Japan made this invasion. How were we going to supply the Chinese? And we had to keep the Japanese busy that were in the country. When you'd see a map that had a great big swath and said, that's occupied country. Not really. It occupied the transportation lines, but there was all kinds of activity possible in the rest of the country. Excuse me. Madame Chang again suggested an air supply line, which sounded pretty horrible to us. Our Air Transport Command, what we call ATC for short, had just 25 suitable airplanes. Not 25 types, but 25 individual airplanes. And the Army Air Corps, which in recent years lost 12 of its pilots in 78 days trying to fly the U.S. mail, they were obviously not very experienced, maybe had enough, 100 pilots for enough experience to even think about flying over what came to be called the hump. The hump was a mountainous home of the world's worst weather. The And I want to show you here and here let's see if this works as I think it will. Yes. Down in the left-hand corner, you can see the Bay of Bengal, and it produces very warm, if not hot, moist air, which tends to flow up towards the mountains just west of Yunnan. There, Arctic air is coming down from the north, and the two of them meet at elevations of probably 15,000 to 23,000 or so, and the collision is violent, really violent, and dark inside the clouds. It's quite frightening to find yourself and your plane controlled by the elements, throwing you around, tumbling the thing, maybe breaking the cargo loose in the back of the plane. And sometimes the cargo is 50-gallon drums of gasoline. You don't want those rolling around too much. But it's known as the world's worst weather. The blue lines, and I sure assume they're blue up there, the blue lines indicate the first attempt at a flight path over those mountains. Now there's a straight line. The dark line is the eastern border of Burma. And where it goes straight up towards the end like a pencil line, it had to, because right next to it is the Salween River and the Mekong River. And they're trapped in very, very deep canyons. Some of these canyons are twice the depths of our Grand Canyon. And I wanted to demonstrate too that those of you who have seen the Grand Canyon have seen that you have levels of accumulation of soil over the centuries. The lines are very obvious. Well, over in this country, I put down my mic to demonstrate. Over there, when the English, when the land was pushed up. All right, thank you. The land was pushed up. It didn't go up like this, it went up like this. And the mountains above Lijiang and Dali Lake and places like that, there's a lot of this straight up stuff. And the canyons, and I've got a picture of one, the canyons are just like that. They're not very wide. You've got a river with the strength of the Mekong in there. It's like a fire hose going through there. And it created incredible obstacles for people trying to escape if they had to bail out of their airplanes. Thank you. What's the road they're trying to save? How about that? Like that? Now that road is rising up on the east side of the Salween Canyon. Now it had to go down something similar to get down where they could cross the Salween, which wasn't easy. Can you imagine? Now, can you see the trucks there? They look like little bugs on the road. But imagine doing that. The mountains around them are a little bit like this. That's a pretty soft-looking picture compared to some of them. As the Japanese went north, they occupied a town called Michigan, northern Burma. Now there's no roads going up there. The rivers went up there, and one railroad went to Lashio, Burma, a good deal south of that. But they got to Michigan and they established some fighters. And they could give a transport plane quite a bit of trouble. This is not a photograph, of course. This is from the Palm Springs Air Museum and Stan Stokes. I was a docent out there for 15 years, I guess. Stan Stokes has a little studio where he paints this stuff, and it's incredible. If you've been to the Reagan Museum out in the valley, he also did the paintings you see out there. that came in being, and so did the Flying Tigers themselves. I told you what their story was so far, and here's the one who got them there. The government was faced with, what are we going to do about airplanes? Well, they started telling all the manufacturers to up what they're doing, Curtiss and Douglas, and they were successful in bringing out more aircraft. They tried to use some bombers, like this one here. That's a consolidated bomber. It had a nickname because it was difficult to handle in the dirt strips of Yunnan or places like that. How many of you been to Yunnan? Any tourists of you go to Yunnan and so on? I understand they got a railroad now from Kunming to Beijing. But it's incredible. This plane wasn't the one that they should have had. It's difficult to handle. It is difficult to handle. And it had a nickname. Because I think it was the C-109 they called it. When they called it a cargo, they called it C-109. And they began to call it the C-109 boom. Because when it had trouble on the dirt strips, it would kind of get out of control and it would blow up. So it didn't have a good reputation. Also, they tried to use it in taking personnel over there. Now, the map that I showed you is halfway around the world from here. And the way to get to it is not across the Pacific. It is today, you should just jet over everything. But in the old days, you had to go the other way. You go down through South America and across the Atlantic. I'll show you a map of that too. As a transport, it wasn't too good. I want you to look at these crowded people. Now they're taking a ride from Florida all the way to India, packed like that. What do you do if you gotta go? You know, it's pretty bad. The DC-3 was also used. That was the ship that I was given. We had plenty of room inside our ship. It had extra gas tanks, or we would have run out over the ocean. There were extra tanks on each side of the ship there. And the third ship that was used was the C-46, and that became the signature aircraft for the hub. This is the route that we took. Puerto Rico from Florida, British Guiana, down to the tip of Brazil. That little crook out in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean is Ascension Island. It's a 35 square mile piece of rock sticking out of the ocean. A little south of there is the island, a similar island that they put Napoleon on 150 years before that. That was our route going across Africa. I think it was about halfway out from the Brazilian coast at 1:30 in the morning. Our navigator, he was a specialist from Long Beach, came up to me and said, "Sir, we just passed the point of no return." I used to read that in adventure books, but didn't think I'd ever be subject to it. Point of no return. But we hit it right on the button. 5 o'clock in the morning, you could see this little pimple out there on the horizon, and that was it. We got into the African coast. I want to show you a picture here. Here I am in Calcutta. I look like I'm in high school, right? That was a chemical officer that we befriended at Ondol, the Calcutta airport. And I just had to show it to you because it's kind of a joke. With that kind of appearance, we landed, when we first hit the African coast in Nigeria, an officer of the day drove up in a big hurry. It's a transfer point. Planes were going from there everywhere. Once they got across the water, different directions. I'm standing in the doorway of the C-46, or C-40, whatever it was, C-47. I've got on a t-shirt, OD t-shirt, pair of pants, no hat. He drives up and he says, "Son, I need to talk to your pilot." I said, "I'm the pilot." He said, "Look, son, I haven't got time to mess around. I need to talk to the pilot." Well, my crew chief was an old guy. He was 26 years old. He picks up my officer's cap and stuffs it on my head and said, "Sir, this is the pilot." That happened more than once. And that picture there, as we left Brazil to go to Ascension Island, we celebrated my 20th birthday at dinner that night. 20! I could see my father at home just shaking his head, you know. How could that be? So in that picture, I'm 20 years old by 10 days, maybe. I think the sad part of it was we had just graduated from cadets within the 12 months before that. Air cadets at the time, just graduating, when this demand for pilots over the hump, they were probably dreaming about going to combat in sleek fighters like the P-51, or maybe the P-38, you know. They were assigned as co-pilots to fly the hump. And most of them had never been in the plane for 1 minute. They just got in and sat down. It might be a little bit like Egyptian Airlines a couple of months ago. You had a person not too much experience sitting in the right seat. All kinds of people that were flying private aviation were recruited and sent over there. In the next 3 years, 500 of those aircraft would disappear over the hump. I think about 1,300 pilot and crew members were lost or killed. Almost 1,200 managed to walk out of the mountains somehow, and most of them appeared 3 months after their families had been notified they were missing. So families had to sit around with that thought. Today, last I looked at something, I think there are 336 or 320 people never found in those mountains. My first assignment was not on the hump. It never was a full-time assignment for me, but I found myself joining an outfit called Combat Cargo, which was organized only this was in February, only in the previous June. The Burma campaign was at such a level they were pushing the Japanese back out of Burma. And I think at this time the Japanese were facing that way too, anxious to get out of there. But there were no roads in northern Burma. So everything had to be delivered by, at that time, C-47s, which is the Douglas aircraft that was used so many years around the world as just a transport. And believe me, we learned how to fly. The guys we were slowly replacing lost 11 people in that first year. You had wrecks and crashes that they couldn't avoid. They just weren't trained this way in the United States. You trained how to get it off the ground and get it back down, not what it amounted to, but not how to get it into, instead of a 5,000-foot runway, not how to get it into a 2,800-foot dirt strip with a big puddle in the middle of it, and in between 150-foot trees. There was one place that once you set up and were ready to land, you couldn't change your mind. You had to land because there was no room for you to change your mind and go around again. And there were a couple of airplanes on the hillside to demonstrate you don't want to try that. The Army Air Corps in 1945 handed me a brand new Douglas transport. And the task of flying it, as you saw on that map, some 14,000 miles across the South Atlantic, across the belt of Africa, along the north shore of the Indian Ocean. As I say, I assigned it into combat cargo, a newly formed unit. We were in effect the United Parcel and FedEx of Burma. We just took everything. I took advantage of that. We got rations of beer, half a case. Well, in India, the beer wasn't too cold. But if you put it in the back of behind your seat in the airplane, it was plenty cold when you got down in there, and it also became currency. I got a pair of very nice, almost new paratrooper boots, which I thought would be great for walking out of the jungle if I had to. And I got a little envelope of small rubies, like that, which I lost in literally what was a cyclone, a nighttime cyclone that destroyed our base in India. I never saw those again. We were ordered to give ATC, Army of, almost said it, Air Transport Command. We had a pleasant rivalry with those guys. They were operating under airline rules, 110 hours a month. Well, most of us on this schedule had 110 hours by the 15th of the month. And one month they took charge of us, but that happened by the 15th of the month. We all on the squadron, all 42 pilots had 110 hours. So we stopped for a day, and headquarters command in India just blew a fuse and told ATC to lay off of us, forget it. They're doing a good job, leave it alone. Air Transport Command, we called them the Army of Terrified Civilians. Which of course brought a lot of giggles from us, but I remember one incident in Yunnan. I remember we were waiting in Yunnan to take off. ATC planes were lined up with us. Let's say my number was 410. The tower called me. We had to wait, we had to follow a white line on the runway because the fog was so bad. The tower called me and said, "You're clear to go." And in the same broadcast said, "ATC, your return to the line, the field is below your minimums." Well, that's like telling them they're no good, you know. That was the rules that they were under, and the cat calling on the radio was incredible. Yeah. Excuse me?
American people or Chinese people? Who works on the airplane?
Ours was all GIs, all American GIs, yeah. So he was telling them, "You got to go back to the line and letting us go." Oh, that was pretty bad. I described a minute ago how the warm, moist air from the Bay of Bengal can create an incredible problem. It can lead to fuel exhaustion. More than one plane leaving Kunming going west checked out the window and saw Dali Lake over at the right. And then they went through some little scattered clouds or so, and then it was clear and Dali Lake was still there. That can't be unless you've got a headwind, ferocious headwind, which they did. You can get a wind blowing against you at 120 miles an hour, and you're just not moving very much. So what you saw a half hour ago as here was only here. But that's the only indication you had because the rest of the sky was all clouded out. You became an expert on instrument flying. That didn't help you if ATC for its own people put in new rules. You're to take off regardless of what the weather is to see if you could get through. From now on, whatever that date was, we're working on a 24-hour basis, meaning you have to fly at night over this thing. Under the same orders, at night you have to take off and see if you can get through. I can't imagine anything worse than having that kind of rules on your head. I'm sure it caused a great deal of the casualties that did happen. These storms, I could tell you, these storms were inside utter blackness and extreme turmoil. One crew flying the kind of plane you saw here, I'll forget that, got caught in a storm. This was a plane capable of flying as much as 18,000 feet. They got caught in the storm, black as night inside. They know they're tumbling around, losing their senses really. They got thrown out the top of the storm at 24,000 feet. They couldn't climb higher than 19,000 if they tried. They're not only at 24,000 feet, they're in the reverse direction of what they intended to go, and they're upside down. The constant objective, let's move through some of this a little. It's not the end of the slideshow, where's the rest of it? I hope in my computer it's still there. Buttons are insensitive. The constant objective of this all and this loss of life was increased tonnage, which in September 1943 was 4,622 tons. When the new orders were issued, when they went on a 24-hour schedule, and no cancellation because of weather, it did make a difference. 2 years later, the tonnage was 71,000 tons, not 4,600. But a lot of loss of life. They just took it as part of the price they had to pay. What they learned over there in that operation was extremely valuable in the Berlin airlift. You familiar with that? The Russians were trying to block the airport in Berlin, and it was frustrated by our ability to operate in the manner they operated there and have a repetition. Landing in Berlin, if you had to cancel your landing and go around, not much of a problem at a regular airport, but over there you had to go all the way back to Frankfurt from Berlin because there were so many planes in a row, there wasn't any room for you. You get out of line, you got to keep going. And they learned that flying the hub. I do want to tell you an interesting little story, which I arrived home on December 2nd, 1945. In my years in the service, I was never away from home on Christmas and New Year's. And I didn't try to be away, it was just the way it was, including coming home from China. I went up to the Department of Motor Vehicles a few days later, dressed in my civilian clothes, to renew my driver's license. gave the man the money. I got about 10 steps away, and he said, "Hey, son, come back here. I'm in civilian clothes. Son, come back here. I see you're not 21 yet. You need to get your parents' signature on this thing." That's a brief description for you of what went on over there. And if you have any questions, I'd be happy to try to answer them. You want to monitor that?
我想每个人都听懂他的英文，所以我应该不需要翻译。而且很多飞行员在这里，比如说张甲先生，这都是台海战役天空上放过枪的。我有2个问题先问他，问完以后你们再来问好不好 ？Jeffrey, I ask you 3 questions, then let people ask you questions, okay? I know in the home pilots, very risky. Every other day, one plane crash. Every other day, one cargo plane crash on the home pilot. 在投放行业，每隔1天掉一架飞机，一共有1485个美国飞行员，就是阵亡，失事在那个home pilot， 在那个投放行业里面。Let me ask you 2 questions. First, when you fly home pilot every morning, are you scared? Number 1.
Uneasy.
Number 2, can you say, I want to quit? 我们这里很多飞行员，中华民国飞行员就说
What did you say?
Okay, because too risky. Can you tell your boss, say, hey, I want to quit. I don't want to fly anymore. Can you do that?
No, but I could, and I did.
You did?
We were flying so much, like 10 or 12 hours a day. We were way beyond regulations.
Before takeoff, you're scared?
No, but just too tired.
Oh, yeah.
So I go into the operations officer and I tell him, I'm too tired. I've been flying 6 days in a row and I'm pooped. I remember doing that on a flight we were making from Luliang, which is a little east of Kunming, down to Nanning, which is almost to the Vietnam border.
2 hours per trip.
Back and forth and back and forth. And this kind of day started at 2 in the morning. So you're over. China looks as black as your coat. I mean, there's no lights, nothing. But you know, you're following a little radio signal that somebody's put in. But that tension, and sometimes you run into weather that you didn't expect, and you end up flying low over the cornfields or whatever they are, and you finally have to give up and go up in the weather. You just got really tired, exhausted. So
Can you tell your squad commander, I don't want to fly anymore. I want to quit because too risky. Can anybody see that?
No one did do that, but you could do that. They send you home.
Nobody done
No, I never even thought about
it?
doing it.
Okay, I'll give you one story. About a couple of years ago, I went to the Louisiana Flying Tiger headquarters. Now, they sent me one pilot, home pilot, asking 2 questions. Dixon, are you scared? You know, what did he say? Of course I'm scared. I'm only 20 years old. I'm supposed to be co-pilot. Now I have not enough people, so I become a pilot. But when the first plane take off from the runway, I'm too panicked. I have no time to scare, so I take off. I have a second question to ask same thing. Can you quit? Like a black cat, like those.
You just say, can you quit?
Can you quit? I don't want to fly anymore.
Yeah, you can do that.
Okay, so I tell the gentleman, he asked me, yes, I could, but people were laughing at you. If you're scared to die, why you want to join Air Forces? 我们这里几个空军先生也是在这里，黑蝙蝠黑猫飞的时候，没有人说我不想飞了。黑蝙蝠有2个，从此在空军里面抬起头来。张甲先生是不是？这位张甲先生就是我们那个 fighter pilot, 104 fighter pilot. Okay, third question. Tell people a story about CBI war. ，you will be airdrop。在这个大家都晓得，在这个远征军里面的时候啊，有7个战役，有5个战役在这个我们讲云南那边。这5个战役里面呢，在中国抗战历史上唯一的这几个战役，把日本人打得一个都不剩。我父亲也参加过远征军的战役，所以我知道这故事。好，他曾经告诉我，他从空中丢 supply。Tell the supply you've been doing on the CBR war。在腾冲战役的时候啊，他参加过。Tell the supply how did you supply drop the rice and two things.
I don't know that I can understand your question, but I'm thinking of something.
Drop the rice and so.
One time I thought we were finished. We were in a storm. We were in a DC-3 and violently tumbled around. And I thought maybe it was too much. The instruments were tumbled and everything. We just didn't know. We made it. I was a co-pilot for this plane, and the pilot was an experienced person. He managed to get the plane out of the storm, and it's like going out a door. All of a sudden, the storm isn't there. And we were both feeling pretty thankful that we got out of this. We go back to the base. We were on our way anyway. Got back to the base. We walk into the operations office, and the guy behind the desk says to the pilot who was getting us out of this trouble, he says, "Hey, I got something here for you." And he put an envelope in front of him, and it was his orders to go home. Here that afternoon, we thought we were cooked.
How many times, the hum pilot, how many times you have to fly to stop? The question I ask you because Black Cat, to fly from Taiwan to Xinjiang, take a photo, come back in 9 hours. All I have to do is take 10 missions, then you can quit. Yeah.
It was a matter of time. If you put in 700 hours, you could go home.
I see. Okay.
If you made it.
我问这个问题的原因啊，还有一件事情我给大家报告一下，在英文的告诉他，大家都晓得这个在20大战，从10支航空军志愿大队一直到这个驼峰航运，我从这个阿凯，从那个华盛顿的档案库里面，我找到了名单，2108个美国飞行员和他的空勤人员阵亡。名单我一个找到，什么时候掉下去，在哪里？这个名单我送给台湾国防部，我希望他把这个名单放到忠烈祠。不过到今天为止呢，国防部只同意了几个事情，放在空军公墓，做2108个墓。第二个呢，把这个2108个名单在空军官校的博物馆里面把它展览出来。但是还没有到忠烈祠，我还在努力。Okay, try to say something. Last year, I went to Taiwan, talked to the Air Forces. I was applying. I tell them, do you have the list of the person, American airman was killed? They don't have it. So I went to Archive, Washington, D.C., spent me 6 months. I collect 2,108 American airmen from AVG to hum pilot who killed in action. And how many people know this? Then I give the list, a whole detailed report to Taiwan. Taiwan family, finally, they say, okay, we're going to put it in Taiwan Arlington graveyard. Also put it on the Museum of Air Force Academy Museum. But they haven't put the place called, we still negotiate this. Not many people know about it. I got to collect it all the men. 所以我在去年我做了这么一件事情。好，这个我上一个问题问完了，还有这两个问题要问他的，因为这个老先生我做也不能做啊，你有问题？
他那个飞行来回一天要飞多少次啊？
哦 ，How many times you fly round trip back from Hanpai?
I had 9 round trips. Those who did it as a profession, they could have had 80 or 90 round trips.
80 or 90.
不是，他一个人9次。
553 miles across from Kunming. And
这个我有本书叫《远征军》，里面讲到这一段，这个他们怎么飞过来，当初把那个把美元的物资从印度飞到昆明回来的时候，应该把这个猪鬃啊、牛这个农作物呢，或者是这些物资呢，还给美国。可是史蒂威他说不要运了，去年运。是为什么在印度有
we chipped in to help them out.
Yeah， 所以说那个时候的中国人问我刚刚
But that was not our basic job.
他说为什么这些美国人肯做这个事情？
But nine trips was enough.
所以这些美国人他的勇敢的程度你难以想象。我儿子在美军打伊拉克的时候，他是连长，他告诉这个小白人。勇敢的不得了 I talk about the people ask me, why American want to join to China? We want to fly this, you know, what's happening? We get killed. But nobody complain. Okay.
They bring you back later.
Yeah, I tell them my son in Iraq do the same thing. They don't complain. 还有没有问题？
I would like to ask, what's your most memorable trip or most dangerous trip you ever remember?
You talk about him?
The trip. Most dangerous.
I would say that was the trip on the hump, the one. I don't think either of us, or just two of us on board, I don't think either of us thought we were going to get out of that storm. And yet, it was so defined that when we popped out of the storm, I remember my heart going from here to here. Because it was like coming out of a dark room and suddenly walking out in the sunlight. The air was so clear that I thought we were about to hit a mountainside. But the mountainside that frightened me had to be at least 20 miles away. But it all of a sudden looked like it was right in front of me. And I can remember, ooh, you know.
I'm alive.
I'm alive. Another time was flying from Yunnan to Sion. I still call it Sion, H-S-I-A-N. We had a plane stuck up there that had tried to cut across the corner of a cement intersection, and the wheel went right down in the mud like this. So we went up there to see it. And flying up there was flying on instruments we couldn't see. But we did a lot of that over there. I picked up something like 200 hours of instruments just flying around China itself. And that always unnerves you. You get to Sion, and other people are going there too, and the weather is over Sion, it's raining. And airplanes are stacked up. I think when we entered the stack, we were number 7. So there are 6 planes down below us waiting to continue their approach. And you get it's going back and forth, and you hope you're doing it right, and you hope the others have the same setting on their instruments so that they're just like you are, and you don't. The only problem that day, there was a plane that was really slow changing altitudes. Everybody come down 500 feet. And somebody, you don't know who's broadcasting, you know, there's 7 planes are on the radio. And somebody lets out an oath and says, "God damn it, get your tail down and out of this stack." And the pilot of that plane said, "I'll have you know I have General so-and-so on board." Well, you can imagine what they said about General so-and-so. You run funny situations and some frightening situations you run into. Landing after that attempt, I found we were landing on wet grass in a C-46, a larger plane. And you slowly put on the brakes more and more and more until I realized the plane was sliding on the grass. Just kind of little bit sideways, and when it stopped, in front of us was, I'd say, a 10-foot drop into some kind of creek or ditch. And they had to bring out an army truck to pull us backwards so we could turn around. You could be afraid of that and not know it was there.
这个很多东西他没讲得很完全啊。事实上，他们这个美军呢，他们这个时间就是在远征军，据他这个背章啊，就是远征军的一个意思。这个远征军里面，从这个驻印军一直到滇西6、7个战役，我们中国军队把日本人打得只剩1、2个人，这个在抗战历史上没有的。其中的原因就是空中支援，就是他们这个美国飞行员，他们也死亡了很多人。他现在连美国人不记得了，连我们中国也不记得。就为什么我做过这个展览会，我全美国各地要展览，我到过休斯顿大学，我到过美国博物馆去。好，还有没有哪位问问题？
Yeah, in your this amazing experience and memory, if we want to ask you just 1 or 2 things, what's the most charitable things you taken from your this experience?
我没懂你的意思。
最感动的，
最
哦，
在他这个人生经验里，这一趟的人生经验，他的
In your whole life,
one or two,
military career,
one or
which
two
one action you most
memorable, or you must it's a charitable.
You know what? This is the last question. If you have more, welcome after refreshment or during the refreshment, you can talk to him. Okay? Thank you so much. 我们最后一个问题，下面还有一位讲者，
I'll answer
让大家
that
都知道了。
question. One more question.
Or most important thing.
I'll answer that question, yeah.
那傅大哥，你可不可以解释一下的问题是什么？这样的，因为我来不及拿麦克风。最后一个问题。
I think you understand.
What about in memory? Can you just let?
他就想刚刚那个他问的就是说，在他的空军这个飞行生涯里面，哪一次其实次次都危险，对，哪一次印象最深？大家都晓得，门口那个板子上写了几个中文字，我们必须得去，不一定每次都会回来。美国也是。
The incident happened in the United States, flying a DC-3, a Douglas plane. And I think, no, we had just released gliders. We were training to pull gliders. Just released the gliders. It was probably 11 o'clock at night. And I saw 2 wing lights, which to me looked like a plane coming towards me, up above me, and the lights kept getting farther apart, a red and a green. It's like a plane coming towards you, coming towards you this way. And I was misreading something because all of a sudden my co-pilot grabbed a hold of the plane and I was going like this and he yanked it up and that way. And what I have in my mind, it's like a photograph. It's dark, it's night. He did that just as we avoided hitting the runway. We would have really messed things up and killed ourselves. I couldn't see it the way it was actually happening. He yanked the plane up like that, and I thought I was almost in the same position as if I were waiting to take off. And we were traveling pretty heavy. It would have been a ball of fire and everything. But it was just, it didn't look proper to me. And I was trying to get away from something that wasn't coming towards me. It was another plane going the other way, pulling a glider. So I'm seeing one of the plane's lights and a light on the glider. So it got more in view, they looked farther apart, as if somebody was coming right at me. I didn't like my co-pilot, but I tolerated him a little better after that. He was my co-pilot all the way across. He was also my tent mate in Unit E. I remember that. So I guess I forgave him.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, thank you for